Insurance is a critical part of managing your finances, protecting yourself and your loved ones. Insurance policies can be a dry subject, and people often do the very minimum and avoid delving deeper into them. In this video, I'm going to try and give a very simple overview of the different types of insurances that you might encounter in the wild, and hopefully the outcome from this video will be you being able to make an informed decision about the types of insurances that you may need. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that I have made specific videos on some of the topics that I'm going to talk about today, where I go into much more detail. So if any of them spark your fancy, they are linked down in the description below. And as we go throughout the video, you may find some that actually are helpful. Feel free to go and give them a watch in your own time. And with that out of the way, let's get straight into it by starting with health insurance, also known as private health insurance or PHI. Health insurance from the highest possible level is intended to cover the cost, if not a portion of the cost of medical care. This can include hospital stays, surgeries, and depending on the level of cover you have, it may also include particular extras. Extras will often cover an even wider range of services and treatments that are not often included in your basic hospital cover. Just to name a few, some extras will cover things like physiotherapy, psychology, optical, podiatry, potentially natural therapies such as massage or acupuncture, and hearing services as well. Now, depending on where you live in the world, having private health insurance can also be tax advantageous. This is an interesting one, something that I had to get my head around as someone who joined the workforce only 6 years ago now at the time of recording this video. And it's worth mentioning that if, for example, you live in Australia and you earn over $90,000 a year, you'll be subject to pay something known as the Medicare levy surcharge, which is an additional tax on our already public health system's tax for medical cover. The tax advantage here in Australia is that if you hold an appropriate level of hospital cover, you are actually exempt from paying that surcharge. And if you wanted to learn more about it, because it may be applicable to you, I've linked the video I've made talking about that topic down below. Just be nice. It's an older video, one that I made when I first started the channel, but the information within is still pretty relevant. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is life insurance. This type of insurance pays out a death benefit to your beneficiaries in the event of your death. And the idea behind it is that it can help provide financial security for loved ones, as well as assist in funeral arrangements and potentially pay off bad debt that you may have outstanding. And depending on where you live as well, there are different types of life insurances that you can take out. There are two common ones known as term life insurance as well as whole life insurance. They're pretty simple in nature, where term life insurance covers a particular period of time, generally between 10 and 30 years, whereas whole life insurance just means throughout your whole life, while you have that policy and you pay that premium, at any point in your life, if you die unexpectedly, that life insurance policy will be paid out to your beneficiaries. For those two in particular, you would need to weigh up your options and determine which one would be more appropriate. One obviously is going to be more expensive than the other for reasons, and I'm not even going to dive into which because it should be pretty straightforward. One thing worth mentioning is that disability insurance is often paired with life insurance as well. So I'm going to kind of combine those two into this one in particular. This type of insurance replaces your income in the instance where you become disabled and unable to work. And again, the idea behind this type of insurance is to help cover the cost of expenses as well as provide some level of financial security in the instance where you're unable to work because of injury or illness. And finally, for this one, within Australia, these types of insurances are usually bundled up as part of your superannuation scheme. So make sure that you do your due diligence, make sure that the level of cover you have through your super scheme is accurate, correct, or what you really want it to be. And just note as well that if you're paying for them there, you don't necessarily have to in most circumstances. You can also take them out privately, which again could potentially be advantageous depending on what your income is. It's worth looking into, doing the math and comparing the two, and then going with the one that's more viable if this is something that you think you may need in the future. Okay, moving on again. One of the most common ones that almost anyone who drives a car should have is motor vehicle insurance. Depending on the level of coverage you have, car insurance covers the cost of damages to your vehicle as well as other expenses related to a car incident. Another thing worth mentioning about motor vehicle insurance policies is that when you actually take that policy out, the company that you take the policy out with is agreeing to not only pay damages for your car, but potentially also expenses related to a liability lawsuit. It's one that often goes unnoticed, one that kind of sits below the radar, but one worth understanding because these types of lawsuits occur regularly. Lots of car incidents happen every single day. And if you drive a car, you are not exempt. you may find yourself in a situation where you actually need that insurance. The key thing here is that you're not only covered for damages for your car as well as someone else's car, but also any medical expenses that come from the injuries sustained in an accident. And depending on where you live, car insurance is generally mandatory in some capacity. In Australia in particular, that is known as CTP, or compulsory third-party insurance, and the one that is kind of optional within Australia is known as comprehensive insurance. But don't take my word for that, because depending on what your financial situation is regarding your car, it actually may be required. Most people who have a loan, comprehensive insurance generally will be required. I've actually made this video right here, which goes into much more depth about car insurance. So if you were interested in learning how to get the best bang for your buck, how to do the research to find the best policy for you, and to understand what policies you may need, feel free to go and give that video a watch. I think it is a pretty good video to give an overview of that process. Plenty of people have watched it and found value in it, which is a really great feeling. So again, it's linked in the description below. And I guess while you're down there, if you could quickly hit that like and subscribe button as well, I would much appreciate it. Let's move on again to the last type of insurance I'm going to talk about in today's video, being home insurance. Depending on the level of cover you have, this should cover the cost to any damage done to your property, as well as any personal belongings contained within. Now, where I have to be really careful with my words is that depending on the policy you hold, this will depend on what you're actually covered for. In some instances, it may include things like natural disasters, it might include fire, it might include other incidents that are kind of like just listed off in the policy, which you may never have thought of. And potentially, again, that liability insurance may be contained within, which is a really good thing to have, because if someone gets injured on your property, they can potentially be insured for whatever expenses, medical expenses, injuries that they've sustained on the job, on the site, whatever it may be covered as part of that policy. And understanding it is really important to make sure that you have the appropriate level of cover based on whatever activities are taking place in that home. If you have a mortgage, lenders often require you to have some level of home insurance, but just understand that contents insurance isn't always necessary. And it's worth noting as well that lots of insurance providers are very flexible in how you set up that coverage. You can put different amounts, you can set different premiums, and you can be very flexible with what in particular you want to cover. They are kind of like Build-A-Bear, but for insurance policies. And depending on what you need in terms of coverage, this is where you do that research and you look for the best potential opportunity to spend the least amount to get the best level of coverage for your situation. If you own an investment property, landlord's insurance is another type of property insurance well worth looking into, because it protects landlords from financial losses in relation to things that occur on their property. And often these types of policies will cover a wide range of things as well, similar to the home insurance ones that I've just mentioned before. Things like liability insurance for your tenants, any type of damage to the property, as well as any loss of rental income depending on the policy that you take out. And it's worth mentioning as well that landlord's insurance is usually optional, which means depending on how risk adverse you are, you may not feel the need to take out a policy. Personally, for my properties, I think the small premium that I pay each year, it's a no-brainer, because I want to make sure that if my house were to burn down, I would be able to rebuild it without having to find the money from somewhere else or borrow money again to go and build it brand new. Now, there are plenty of other types of insurance policies that you can take out for various things and reasons depending on what your situation is, because everyone is in a unique situation. Everyone's kind of telling their own story here. I'm just going to list them off, and if I feel like it, I may potentially make another video on the topic explaining or going into more depth about these ones in particular. But just off the top of my head, they would include things like business insurance, trauma insurance, pet insurance, travel insurance, as well as natural disaster insurance, which depending on where you live, it may be something that you really need to consider, because general insurance companies may not offer that level of coverage based on the landscape and how things have played out over the past number of decades, where they've lost money and no longer offer that service as part of their current insurance policies. In my honest opinion, insurance is something that people really don't put enough effort into getting right. It's actually really unfortunate as well, because insurance plays a critical role in our daily lives in ensuring that our routines can stay on track and that we are safeguarded. Not just us, our loved ones too. All of that comes into play, and it's something that, again, I really don't think people put enough effort into getting it right. Simply by being at this point in the video, you should now have a high level understanding of some of the more common types of insurances that are out there that people every single day are taking out policies for to protect themselves in very specific scenarios. You should now be able to go away from this video with that idea in mind and say, hey, how many of these are applicable to me? Which ones do I need to do a deeper dive into and really consider taking out a policy for? And then hopefully from there, you'll be able to make informed decisions and get a good deal for whatever insurance policy you determine you may actually need. As a one-liner, the best way to go about doing this is to compare lots of different companies to each other for a very particular type of cover, even call them up, speak to them and see what discounts they can apply to that policy, and then go with the one that's going to be best for yourself, your family, your loved ones, whoever you're getting it for, and for whatever reason you're getting it for. It should just put you in the best possible situation to make sure that you are covered adequately, and you should be able to have that peace of mind for a relatively inexpensive cost over the long term. That is pretty much all I wanted to cover in today's video. So hopefully I've given you some insight into the topic. And if I did, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button down below. You have no idea how much it really helps the channel grow and how much I really do appreciate it. So thank you for taking the time out of your day if you did do that for me. With that being said, I'm going to leave you there. So have a good day, have a good week. And as always, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.